Tonight on The Nation Speaks, Michigan examines Dominion voting machines. What does it mean? And in Georgia, poll monitors still have unanswered questions. Hello and good evening and welcome to The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Drucare. According to current numbers in Michigan, Joe Biden is ahead of President Donald Trump by 2.8 points. Michigan is one of the states where election results are still in dispute, and some important new evidence might soon come to light, as I learned when I sat down earlier with my next guest. Joining us tonight is former Michigan State Senator Patrick Colbeck. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
So let's get right to it. A big development in Michigan is that you've been able to do a forensic examination on some Dominion machines. Do you know the result of that?
I wish I did, and it should be made public to everybody. I know that affidavits were submitted, but they're under a protective order right now from Judge Elsenheimer. And the really frustrating part about this is that ever since I was deployed as a poll challenger at the Detroit AV Counting Board, and for about a 24-hour marathon session, once I figured out what day it was after that, my first priority was getting access to these Dominion servers, because we actually knew, and there was evidence, incontrovertible evidence, that votes had flipped from President Trump to Biden on this, and we wanted to get our hands on that server to identify exactly what was happening, because the same system is being used in 47 out of 83 counties in Michigan, and it's used in 28, I believe, states across the country, including most, if not all, of the battleground states. So this is a big deal, and it was good to actually finally get the authority to go off and get access to the server, but frankly, that should be made open to the public, because time is a-wasting right now. We got December 14th is right around the corner.
And so just remind us, how many votes are we talking about that flipped?
In Antrim County, out of a county of about 22,000 people, 6,000 votes were flipped. So if you start extending that kind of math magic, if you will, to counties like Wayne County, which is where I live, that's 850,000 votes were cast in Wayne County. Use that same proportion, you're starting to talk about more than enough to address 154,188 vote deficit that's currently projected for President Trump in Michigan. And all indications are President Trump won Michigan by a landslide, as well as a lot of the other battleground states. We just have to have an opportunity to present our evidence in court, and right now, a lot of these lawsuits are getting pushed back because of procedural reasons. Meanwhile, the clock's ticking, and we're letting people get away with stolen election.
How many actual machines were looked at? Do you know?
I know I think there's roughly 22 townships, if I'm familiar, in Antrim County. So I don't know if they were able to get access to every single one of them at the time, but they were all being stored up at the county. So presumably all the machines that were stored up at the county they had access to.
And did the judge give a reason for why those results aren't being made public yet?
He just wanted to be able to control the flow of information, which frankly, time is of the essence right now. And there's no reason this should be hid at all from the American people. We've been told by too many people that there is no evidence of election fraud, and here we have probably the one particular incident of election fraud that both Republicans and Democrats agree that there's an anomaly here, a data anomaly that flipped votes. And yet here we're being told that we can't make that public right when December 14th, which is when all these electors are being assigned to the Electoral College, is being made public. I'm sorry, but no, we need to know that. We need to know it now.
So when it first came to light that there were some votes that flipped, they said initially that it was a technical glitch, and then it changed to some sort of clerical error. So we assume this is going to clear that up, correct?
Yeah, as a former Michigan State Senator, let me put that in context. The reason they said software glitch initially was because they didn't, and the reason that they changed it because software glitch, which is probably more accurate to what actually happened, would indicate that they changed the configuration of the software within 90 days of the election, which would automatically decertify all the results for that county. So they changed their story to say that it was clerical error, and under Michigan statute, you can't decertify an election or decertify any votes as a result of a clerical error. So there was a political maneuver to what they had done initially. But now, hopefully, with the forensic analysis and affidavits submitted to Judge Elsenheimer, we have the actual proof of exactly what happened in Antrim County.
I believe the Dominion CEO said he will appear in front of the Michigan legislature. What do you think is going to happen there?
It's about time, but once again, we're talking about timing. And it's very convenient that everybody's trying to get well at the 11th hour when the time for actually making substantive findings or whatever was weeks, if not even before the election, around Dominion voting systems. I mean, people had highlighted concerns about that a long time ago. Frankly, if the evidence coming out of Dominion voting systems is half as damning as I believe it's going to be, all the folks at Dominion right now should be going off and contacting legal authorities to try to get some sort of protection around their own whistleblowing activities, because otherwise we're going to be coming after them for the possibility of getting them into some orange jumpsuits, because I believe there's serious evidence of election fraud that's coming here. And when that happens, they're going to want to be on the right side of the law.
And you were concerned even on election day about those machines when you were there observing. What did you see?
Yeah, so on election day, I highlighted that my background, I'm a certified Microsoft small business specialist. I did cabling design on the International Space Station. Furthermore, I served 2 terms as a Michigan State Senator, where I actually served as the Vice Chair on the Senate Elections and Government Reform Committee. I understand election processes. My big concern is around a term called chain of custody. And while a lot of the poll challengers out at the Detroit AV County Board were focused on individual ballots and verification of ballot envelope signatures and making sure that ballots are transcribed accurately, I was focused in on something that's a little bit more difficult to see, which is the sharing of vote tally information from the tabulator machines, which had high-speed scanners for the ballots, and where those tabulated results were transmitted, and what was the chain of custody around those tabulated results. And what I saw horrified me, because I saw that there was an obvious connection between the tabulators, the adjudicator machines, and their local data center and the internet. And if you're connected to the internet in any way, shape, or form, you have breached that chain of custody, because especially when you look at the data that's been made available in different affidavits, like Sidney Powell's lawsuit, where Dominion administrator passwords are available up on the internet, up in the dark web. You've got folks at the National Institute of Standards and Technology that have put out all of the characteristics of the Dominion voting systems that a hacker would need to know in order to exploit it and change votes around, publicly displayed for everybody to go off and see. All that information is available up on the internet. So all it takes is a bad actor to go off and leverage that information to go off and start modifying votes on the fly. And so if you're connected to the internet, I don't know if you guys remember Ferris Bueller and the opening scene there where he's changing his grade. There's nothing that prevents Biden from changing his grade in this election as well, with pretty much the same techniques that they were using, except it's no longer in a dial-up modem phase.
And did you raise that concern immediately after you saw that?
Yeah, absolutely. I asked all the election officials, I said, hey, are you connected to the internet? They swore up and down, no, we're not connected to the internet. Nothing to see here. These aren't the droids you're looking for. And I went around to all the different monitors. And if you're watching this on a Windows 10 based PC, you can go down your bottom right-hand corner. You'll see a little icon in there that's a LAN connection icon on it. If you scroll over it, you will see that it says internet or connected to internet if you're connected to the internet. And every single one of the monitors for the tabulators and adjudicators had that icon active. So they like to think that because they have a firewall in the system that they're air-gapped, if you will, and impervious to intrusions, but doesn't work that way. People have DEF CON conferences every single year to go off and exploit voting systems in particular. It's a favorite of theirs, and they can breach that system in a matter of seconds.
And with this Texas-initiated lawsuit that's been brought before the Supreme Court, Michigan is one of the 4 states that's been named to have irregularities that could, impact the entire outcome of the election. What's Michigan's stance on that lawsuit right now?
Well, after encouraging a few of my fellow colleagues from my former days in the legislature to sign on, it looks like I think we've got over a dozen legislators that have now signed up in support of that Texas lawsuit that alleges that the executive branch in Michigan exceeded their authority. That's the Secretary of State and the governor with some of the rules that they introduced in this election law without the approval of the legislature. And under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the election purview is the sole purview of our legislatures. And so she's been usurping authority ever since this COVID outbreak in various ways. And I'm happy to see that the Texas Attorney General has actually brought suit against. And I think all the people of America have right to be concerned about these rogue governors like we have in Michigan, like Governor Whitmer and our rogue Attorney General Dana Nessel and our rogue Secretary of State. They are operating outside of the rule of law, and finally we have somebody from outside the state actually holding them accountable for it.
And what were the specific laws that were changed in Michigan?
Oh, well, first of all, they submitted mail-in ballots. Essentially, technically what they did is that they used our current qualified voter file to go off and mail out absentee ballot applications to everybody in the state. Now, problem with that is that that's not the way it usually works. Our Secretary of State did that unilaterally without legislative approval. And why that's a problem is because 20% of the data inside of our qualified voter file is invalid. There's a lot of the voters in there are not eligible voters, and she just sent it out to them anyway. Well, obviously that's going to be an issue. They also developed a public-private partnership where they allowed a third party, which is Rock the Vote, to actually go off and access and enter data directly into our qualified voter file. Now, there's 4 key links in a chain of custody for an election. And if you kind of hold up this link here, the top link of this is our qualified voter file. Next, there's a poll book, which is essentially the precinct-specific extract of that qualified voter file, which is used by poll workers to verify the identity of voters. And then it's the ballots themselves, and then it's the vote tally, which we were talking about before when I was concerned about the internet connection. If you've broken that top link, all the rest of the links fall to the ground. And on that one piece of evidence alone, her messing with our qualified voter file, they've already broken the election downstream.
And so what are you expecting to happen at this stage?
I expect Donald Trump to be reelected for his second term in office, because I think he won by an overwhelming margin here in the state of Michigan. The data anomalies that we're seeing alone indicate that there's something rotten in Denmark. And, they've had years to go off and plot this. And we've had weeks to go off and put together the puzzle pieces here without the box cover for the puzzle. And I think we've got the box cover coming into focus now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be certainly keeping an eye on what happens in Michigan.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to get the truth out. It's getting more and more difficult every single day.
Coming up after the break, former poll monitors in Georgia tell their stories. But first, here's America Q&A.
I check out the opposite, so I do look at both.
I try to get different perspectives. I watch public broadcast, PBS. I listen to the public radio station on radio.
I stick to media that's in line with my political leanings. If I look at the other stations, I get pissed off.
Everything in this country is run by somebody that we don't see, somebody that's behind the scenes. So, of course, there's always going to be things that push certain views, certain agendas for the masses. I mean, that's how people vote. That's how people decide what they're going to do, where they're going to go, what they're going to buy into. So it's something behind everything.
I like both sides. I like to see what both sides are saying.
Watch Fox News, I watch CNN, we watch all of it.
A little complicated because my wife is towards my leanings of political, but she's a little more open-minded about watching all the channels because she likes to hear what the other person say. So I'll end up, when we go to bed at night, she'll end up spinning through all the channels and watching them all so she can drive me crazy. So we end up watching a little bit of all the channels.
I'm not a huge person into media now. When I was, about 3 or 4 years ago, I would look at every point of view because as a counselor, practicing counselor, I want to look at every point of view no matter what.
Absolutely. I try to see what they're saying, and what I have come across, it's more emotional based versus back in the days, Walter Cronkite, which I can still remember, where they would just kind of list the facts and then you just kind of take your own conclusion. I don't like news reporters who cry. No offense, but I don't like them crying over a result or whatever, because that just tells me you're just now biased versus just reporting the facts.
Welcome back. In Georgia, with the Senate runoff elections fast approaching, there are still concerns about the November 3rd vote. Lawyers and lawmakers have collected piles of affidavits, but not all of those stories are widely known. Joining us tonight are Susan Knox and Ben Hendrick. Both were Republican poll monitors for the Georgia election. Welcome both.
Thank you for having us.
So, Susan, why don't we start with you? We have another election coming up in Georgia, and I know both of you still have some unanswered questions, unanswered concerns from the last one. Susan, why don't you explain to us what your main concerns were? And I know you've got some video footage of most of it. So walk us through that.
Okay, well, I will tell you that on Friday, November the 13th, I showed up at Jim Miller Park as an observer. And I quickly realized there were no Republicans inside the bullpen. And so I quickly got credentialed. And when I was waiting to get inside the bullpen, I was videoing. And as I was videoing, I saw a fellow that every single ballot was going in the Biden bin. So when I got credentialed, I went inside the bullpen and I went straight to his table. And I got very close because I wanted to see what was on the actual ballot, and I got swarmed by the people that were working for the elections, and they just came over and said, you know, you can't be this close, you've got to be 6 feet away, you've got to pull your mask up. They were doing everything they could to discourage me from being able to do my job as a monitor. Later that afternoon, I walked over to a table, and they had a stack of probably 1,000 ballots for Donald Trump, and they were feeding them through a counter. And I can honestly tell you, with your eye, you can tell a ream of paper. And I knew it was more than 454 ballots, which is what they put on the count. And so I questioned that, and they said, too bad, that's what the counter said, and that's what it is. The next morning at, it was Saturday, November the 14th, I came in about 11:30, and I was told immediately that they were not going to use the counting machines anymore. They had to do it strictly by hand. And to be honest with you, every time I would walk over to a table and I would watch them starting to make stacks of 10, you really couldn't tell if it was for Biden or for Trump, and they were 2 people at each table, and they were mixing them up. I mean, I saw them doing all these different kinds of stacking situations. Every table was doing it differently, and it just raised a lot of suspicion and a lot of questions for me. And I have a trusty little black notebook that I have right here, and I was taking notes the entire time as they were given their full count on a white sheet of paper. And after a while, they were blocking me from even seeing the table where the final tallies were going. And so that was just a huge issue for me as well. And then to wrap it up, on Friday, November the 20th, I was at Jim Miller Park. It was the day they were going to certify the votes. And I showed up early. I wanted to know who was in the building that was going to be certifying the votes. And I saw a piece of paper go up on the outside of the building, and it had a phone number, and it said, you know, this facility is closed to the public for election questions, please call. And it was a number. I called the number. An old woman answered. She slammed the phone down on me. I called back and said, ma'am, your number is on the outside of Jim Miller Park for election questions. And she said, well, I don't have a clue. That's not me, and hung up again. So as I was pulling around the building, I saw an A1 shredding and recycling truck. and I videoed the recycling truck, and I could not believe my eyes. And I was seeing a gentleman roll an entire cart out filled with absentee ballots, and they were just overflowing, and there were boxes that said shred. And this was the day they were certifying the election, and it was at 11:10 a.m., and it was box truck number 15. And I mean, I just really could not believe my eyes. And I jumped out of the car and went over and started photographing as much as I could and got as close as I could. And I called 911 2 times. We have the video recordings of that. And the police didn't show up, and the truck was leaving. And so a friend of mine had shown up, and her name is Sally, and Sally followed the truck out of the gate, and I was behind Sally, and we went on a wild goose chase. And, you know, let me tell you, if the guy was honest and above board, he wouldn't have taken us on a wild goose chase through running red lights and going through shopping centers and taking a right turn from a far left lane. And he absolutely, you know, knew we were following him. And if he was honest and innocent, he wouldn't have cared, but he did. And so that was kind of my story at the end. And, you know, shredding ballots is right in front of our face, and thank God I was there with my video camera to prove it.
So there's no doubt in your mind that those were ballots that were going into the shredding truck?
Well, if you get close in the video, it says official absentee ballot. Now, it could have been, you know, the envelopes. I didn't take one out. I should have. In retrospect, I wish I would have put my hand in a couple of those different bags and boxes and had proof right there. But I can tell you that when you look at the actual video and you look at the photographs that I took, there is no doubt that, you know, whatever was in those bins that he was shredding, nothing should have been, you know, shredded before they even certified the election. And I understand that you're supposed to keep everything for either 22 or 24 months anyway. So having huge bins and boxes with bags and bags and bags of either envelopes or actual ballots, you know, to me just raised huge concern.
I understand. All right, Ben, what is your story? I know you also have a cybersecurity IT background, so you have a bit of a different take on things. What did you see during the election that bothered you and I guess still bothers you?
Sure, and thanks, Cindy, for having us on the show tonight. I appreciate the opportunity, you know, to share our story. So my first opportunity, I got a phone call from a friend that asked me to come over and be a GOP monitor for DeKalb County. So I obliged. I was able to make some time and go over there and be a part of that, work a shift. And the specific assignment that they asked me to take on was to work what we call the adjudication table. So the Dominion voting system, if a ballot's not able to be recognized by the system, it's processed or moved over to a queue. And as adjudication monitors, the people that are involved, we had to basically have to accept the ballot or to reject the ballot or quarantine it. And we were made up of, each table was made up of 2 nonpartisans, which I learned were primarily Democrats. And then there was a Democratic monitor and then myself. And as these batches were coming through this process of the adjudication, which we really got to decide at that point whether it was being counted. This occurred on November the 4th, the day after the election. So we were processing the mail-in ballots that had been exceptioned. I started noticing a lot of the ballots that were coming through that the only thing that people voted, the person who voted on that ballot, was for the presidential race. So all the other items that were on the ballot for all the other important things of being a DeKalb County citizen, they left it blank. And when you looked at it on the scanner or the image that the scanner had captured, you couldn't tell if it was somebody had used a pencil or if they actually were printed. And they only voted for Joseph Biden. That was it. And these kept coming through. And I asked questions like, why are these people only voting for Joseph Biden? Why are they not selecting anything else? And the nonpartisans always had an answer for everything. Oh, well, some people only want to vote for the presidential and nothing else. I mean, there was all these excuses. So it raised a lot of concerns and issues in my mind. And the volume of these were coming through. The first thing I kept thinking, these have got to be fraud. There's something wrong with these. And then as the other batches started coming through, we saw something similar where they only selected the presidential, But then for all the other options of the mail-in ballot for write-in, they put Mickey Mouse. It looked like it had been printed on a printer. And Mickey Mouse was there over for every item on that ballot. And the next one came through, there was another Mickey Mouse. And there was a SpongeBob. And there was all these, fictional characters. And I raised the issue that day, said, there's something going on here. I don't believe these ballots should be accepted. And I was basically, persuaded by the others there that there was no choice but to accept them. So I filed an affidavit. I sworn to a penalty of perjury of what I saw, and I raised the issue within the leadership of the GOP. So after going through that experience, Cindy, I had the opportunity then to do the same thing at my home county, Cobb County, and that's when I had the pleasure of meeting Susan Knox. So I walked in the door, wanted to be a monitor, saw the situation, kind of what Susan described, and so I was able to do some videoing and filming and capturing kind of the moment there, and then actually got the opportunity to go on the floor. And as I went on the floor, one of the table supervisors came up to me and says, "You're not official. You need to get out of here." And I'm like, we were told specifically not to have any conversation with any of the workers. If we had issues, we were to go to the county supervisor to address the issue with her. So I went to her. She basically vouched for me, said, "No, he's in, he's official, he's good." But then she told him, I heard him say, "You need to keep an eye on him." So I've learned in the cybersecurity business, when you get over the target, people will start behaving differently. You'll see things happening different in real time. So I really homed in on that table and started looking at what was going on there, specifically with the ballots that were coming in from the South Cobb area, specifically Fair Oaks precinct. And we noticed that some of the ballots had yellow paper on them. They were printed on like a yellow tinted cardstock, which was very different than all the other ballots that were being counted and processed. And all of them were for Joseph R. Biden. So I went over to the scanners. They were count those or run through that process, and they were all the same. They all had Joseph R. Biden on it. So I became very concerned. I invited Sally, that Susan mentioned, to come over to witness it. John Dowdy was there, which was our GOP supervisor, brought it to his attention. And we raised it to the county officials. And once again, they had an answer for it. They said it was just an anomaly with the paper. And I learned yesterday through part of the Senate testimony that was going on in the state of Georgia that cardstock was not to be used for ballots. That it was basically a test paper that could be used for doing tests and calibration, but they shouldn't have been used for actual ballot counting. So I recorded all the information, the batch, the precinct, everything. And my request was to have that box audited because there was such a massive room there. There were only, Susan, only 4 of us on the floor trying to cover it. And I only had the chance really to focus on that one table as an example for that day. So it was very concerning. We were told specifically not to wear anything that had logos on it, like NRA or whatever, right? SpaceX or especially MAGA or anything related to that. And so when I showed up the second day, I didn't have anything like that. Wore something similar to what I'm wearing now. But I noticed all the poll workers that were working the other tables were all wearing Black Lives Matter shirts. And my question was, why is it that we get told one set of rules, but then the workers live by a different set? That's one of the challenges I've had with this. There seems to be a lot of hypocrisy that's going on. And so there were some of us witnessed that. We brought the issue up. I actually did a sworn affidavit on that one as well and have submitted that. So these are the type of things that are going on. You're seeing, what I call it counterfeit ballots. If you look at money, if I inject counterfeit money in the system, there's a way to verify whether it's counterfeit or not. And we were pushing to get answers on that. My question was, can we see the signature verification on these ballots? Who are all these people only voting for president? And we were told, nope, you can't do that. Your job is this. You've been compartmentalized. You can't ask those type of questions. So those are the type of issues that I had, with the November 3rd election and going to this January 5th runoff. It's a bigger deal. We have to fix these problems, or I think the people of Georgia, like myself and Susan, don't feel comfortable just going back to the polls and doing this all over just exactly the way it was done on November 3rd.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
And that's all for tonight's show. Thank you for watching The Nation Speaks. Join us again on Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And from all of us here, good night.